Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie. And in this video, I'm going to be looking at the week starting on Monday, March the 3rd, 2025. And I'm going to start this video by doing a blow-by-blow account of the main events taking place this week, the main astrological events. And I will briefly interpret them, but they are a preview. And in my daily forecasts in the week ahead, I will be looking at these events in detail. And at the end of the video, I'm going to do an I Ching reading for the week. And this reading will have 4 sections. I'll look at the general picture, then money, then career, and finally relationships. There's also my special topic. And my special topic is going to be Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine. They did have this meeting in Washington, D.C., which apparently didn't go down particularly well. There was certain friction between the two men, and I want to sort of look at what was going on at the time of this meeting. But let's start by considering the main events this week. Usual reminder, if you happen to like this video, I would be very grateful if you were to really indicate that you liked it. And if you're not subscribed and you enjoy the video, I really would appreciate it if you were to become a subscriber. So here is the chart for the beginning of the week. Midnight on Monday, set for New York. That's Monday, March the 3rd. And you can see that the planet Venus is in Aries, but there's a little R next to it. That means that Venus is now retrograde. So that is a big change. And this week is, the first week where we really start to feel what it's like for Venus to be retrograde. And it's a time when, we do have to watch our tastes. We might think, for example, that something looks beautiful, but in the light of today, it might not be quite as attractive as it seems to be on the surface. And we have to be particularly careful when it comes to spending money with Venus retrograde. We might buy things on the spur of the moment, maybe because something looks good, but over time, we might realize that it was money wasted, and we have to put up with something that eventually turns out to be quite ugly. And also Mars, of course, does not have an R next to it, and that's a reminder that recently Mars went stationary direct. So with Mars going stationary direct, things are moving now, and it's perhaps easier for some of us to assert ourselves. Now on Monday itself, Mercury has a sign change. So you can see that at midnight, beginning of a week, Mercury is, I think that's at 29:45 Pisces. But it's on the verge of moving into Aries. And I think at 9:04 a.m. London time on Monday, Mercury moves into Aries, and that would be in the middle of the night if you're in the Americas. It'll be later in the day if you're in Australia and New Zealand. So Mercury moving into Aries has a couple of consequences. Firstly, there are fewer planets in Pisces. So we had this huge build-up in Pisces. Over the weekend, there was a time when we actually had 5 planets in Pisces because the moon was in Pisces. Then the moon moved out of Aries, and now the moon moved out of Pisces into Aries, and now Mercury is moving into Aries. So there's more fire in the sky. We've got Venus in Aries, even though it's retrograde, and now we've got Mercury in Aries as well. So that means that there's a certain sort of get up and go. There's a certain spark in the air, and things might actually seem more exciting now that Mercury is out of Pisces. But Mercury moving out of Pisces has an impact on the planet Jupiter, because Jupiter is in Gemini. and which is a sign of Mercury. And while Mercury was in Pisces, it was in a sign ruled by Jupiter, so they were in mutual reception. So what happens is that when Mercury moves into Aries, Jupiter actually weakens. So Jupiter as a planet is, it's in its detriment. It's in Gemini. I mean, okay, it's not retrograde anymore, but it is in its detriment. I believe that Jupiter is also peregrine. It doesn't have any essential dignity in the part of Gemini in which it is placed, and the reason it's peregrine is because it's no longer in mutual reception with Mercury. So Jupiter, now that Jupiter is in Gemini, sort of unsupported, that may say something about principles and morality. And Jupiter in Gemini can sometimes be a little bit devoid of principles, or can just be focusing on the small things without seeing the bigger picture. And recently, there has been quite a lot of pessimism around, in general, about the way the world is going. And so with Mercury moving into Aries, there might be a continuation of that pessimism. But I probably need to look at that in sort of more detail in a day or two's time. Also, when Mercury moves into Aries, well, Mercury's on the Aries point. The Aries point represents the world at large. Mercury on the Aries point is about communication and how we communicate. And although Mercury is no longer in mutual reception with Jupiter, it is still making an aspect to Jupiter. It's making a quintile to Jupiter on Monday. The Mercury and Jupiter are 72 degrees apart. You can actually see this. Mercury is in Aries. There's 30 degrees in Aries. There's the 30 degrees in Taurus. So 30 plus 30 is 60. Then Jupiter's at 12, so we stick on 12, so that gives us 72 degrees. And 72 degrees is 1/5 of the circle. So with Mercury quintile Jupiter at the beginning of a week, there is a certain feeling that we can make more of things. Mercury quintile Jupiter just wants to be optimistic, wants to see things in the best possible light, even though even though Jupiter is in a poor position, even though it's no longer in mutual reception, even though it's peregrine. There's still this desire to try to be positive. And although I'm not a big fan of positive thinking, with that Mercury quintile Jupiter, if we have an idea about how well things could work, we can actually turn that idea into reality. I mean, we have to have a belief in ourselves, and we have to work hard, and we have to really engage with the world around us. But I think it is something that we can do. Then on Wednesday, which is March the 5th, we have a sextile between Mercury and Pluto. So Mercury, beginning of Aries, makes a sextile to Pluto at the beginning of Aquarius, and this is a time when we can deliver our message. We can say what we think very clearly, and in the process we may have the opportunity to change hearts and minds. That is Mercury sextile Pluto. We have a talent. I mean, all of us have a talent. These planetary aspects, they are latent energies, and if we make a special effort to use these latent energies, we can be, pleasantly surprised. On the other hand, with Mercury sextile Pluto, it just may be about people out there who are persuasive, who can be cleverly persuasive. Then looking at the end of a week, on Saturday, we have two aspects. That is Saturday the 8th. We have two aspects involving the Sun. We have Sun making a trine to Mars and Sun making a semi-square to Pluto. So That would be Sun around, I don't know, 17, 18, Pisces, something like that, making a trine to Mars at around 18 Cancer. So Sun-Mars trines are very dynamic. Okay, it's in water signs. So Sun trine Mars can be clever in an emotional sense, can understand what's going on emotionally, and can use that understanding to get one's way. And that's the best way to use this Sun trine Mars. Yeah, we can get our way, but we do have to be subtle about it, and we have to use our feelings. And the Sun is also making a semi-square to Pluto, and Sun semi-square Pluto, very power-orientated aspect. So you put Sun semi-square Pluto and Sun trine Mars together, and that is about wanting to get one's way, wanting to be victorious, wanting to be taken seriously. Hopefully it's us wanting to get our way, and not someone else who might be manipulating us or trying to push us around. Now, because the Sun is making a trine to Mars and the Sun is making a semi-square to Pluto, we kind of have to think of a common aspect involving Sun, Mars, and Pluto, and that's very much about the number 24, because Sun trine Mars is a trine. That's about the number 3. Sun semi-square Pluto, 1/8 of a circle, is a number 8, and so what number is divisible by both 3 and 8? And the answer is 24, and 1/24 of the circle is 15 degrees. And so what we see on Sunday is Mars and Pluto making a 15-degree series aspect. You can spot the 15-degree series aspects by subtracting 15 from one of the planets. So you will see that over the weekend, Mars is at 18 degrees 6 Cancer. You take 15 away from 18 degrees 6, and that gives us 3 degrees 6, and Pluto is at 3 degrees 6 Aquarius. So the Sun, Mars, Pluto, all coming together using this 24th harmonic aspect, and it is about power. People at the end of the week, over the weekend, really wanting to be in control and maybe preparing to sort of push things to the limit. But that is something I'll be discussing when I look at the week next weekend, when I do my video for the weekend of the 8th and 9th of March. But that's not going to be out for nearly a week. So that's a broad picture. And now I want to look at this meeting between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky. And I looked at some of it. I looked at some of the things that Donald Trump was saying. Here is Donald Trump's chart, and it's kind of interesting that Donald Trump was saying it's not his job to sort of hate anyone. If he really hated Putin, I mean, everyone in the West is supposed to hate Putin, and if he really hated Putin, how could he possibly do a deal? I mean, that is not the basis for doing a deal. And of course, the Democrats had complete and utter contempt for Putin, and they saw him as almost the devil incarnate. And of course, they couldn't negotiate with him, and diplomacy completely broke down. And Trump was saying, whose interests is he working in? He said, well, he's working in the interests of America. And I was listening to what he was saying, and it seems to me that his approach is actually quite traditional. And sort of I'm reminded of George Washington's farewell speech or farewell address to the American people. He didn't actually give an address. It was more of a pamphlet, and he was looking at the the problems in America and in the new republic, and how people should behave and how the country should behave. And he said something really interesting. And so what George Washington wrote in his farewell address, and he talked about many things, but he said, this was on September the 19th, 1796, that it was published, and he said, against the insidious wiles of foreign influence, I conjure you to believe me, fellow citizens. The jealousy of a free people ought to be constantly awake, since history and experience prove that foreign influence is one of the most baneful foes of republican government. But that jealousy, to be useful, must be impartial, else it becomes the instrument of a very influence to be avoided, instead of a defence against it. Excessive partiality for one foreign nation and excessive dislike of another cause those who may actuate to see danger only on one side, and serve to veil and even second the arts of influence on the other. Real patriots, who may resist the intrigues of a favourite, are liable to become suspected and odious, while its tools and dupes usurp the applause and confidence of a people to surrender their interests. Now, I think that so describes what happened over the last couple of years. This obsession with Ukraine, the US being completely partial, and it seemed that there were a group of people, especially in the State Department, who were almost sort of influenced by Europe. They often had sort of ancestral connections to Europe, and they brought their baggage over with them. The idea is that when you move to America, you should forget everything, and you should be an American. You should consider sort of American interests and put them first. And so anyone that was questioning the narrative that it's America has to throw everything at Ukraine, send hundreds of billions into Ukraine, and keep supporting this war, was accused of being a Putin bot or whatever. And again, that is exactly what George Washington was warning about. So I thought, whatever you think of Donald Trump, and I'm not a citizen, but if I were a citizen, I would never vote for him, simply because of his attitude to the environment. But I thought that, Trump was really saying something very sensible, putting America first and not being overly partial. And George Washington did warn against that partiality. So here is Donald Trump's chart, and he was host to Zelensky. So what was going on for Donald when Zelensky dropped into the White House? So it was around 1 o'clock, I think, that the meeting took place. It was a relatively short meeting, and so here we're going to put Trump in the inner wheel, the meeting on the outer wheel, and at the time of this meeting, and I'll go into this meeting sort of in detail in a moment. Saturn was at 2040 Pisces. There was actually a moon conjunct. The moon was conjunct Saturn when the meeting took place. I mean, that's a great time to have a meeting, isn't it? Saturn just closes the moon down, and Donald Trump has his north node at 20 degrees Gemini, 20 degrees 48 Gemini. So that moon conjunct Saturn was right on Trump's north node. So north node square Saturn transiting the north node can be about the breakdown of relations or a breakdown of connections. And that really does seem to be what happened. But, it's what was going on in Zelensky's chart that was certainly, I think, as far as I can see, more interesting. So if we go to that chart, so if we start off by looking at that meeting, the actual meeting when it took place. So I think it started at about 1 o'clock. I mean, if it started at 1 o'clock, I mean, that's a great time, isn't it? Again, Moon conjunct Saturn. That really is not a good aspect to have a meeting. And if it really was at 1 o'clock, we had the Moon conjunct Saturn quite close to the midheaven, in fact, very close to the midheaven, and we had Mars. Had Mars in the first house. So this perhaps didn't really bode well. And also think about Venus. Venus is coming to a standstill. Venus is not quite retrograde, but it's almost there. And so Venus being stationary retrograde, almost stationary retrograde, that really does mess things up. And so that's perhaps not a good time to be having negotiations. And it was Zelensky that really got hit by this meeting. So if we look at Volodymyr Zelensky's chart and we just consider how this meeting impacted him. So Volodymyr Zelensky, he has his ascendant at 2147 Gemini, assuming that Volodymyr Zelensky really was born at 2 p.m. And we don't know that for sure. I mean, 2 p.m. is a rather round number. Maybe he was born at 5 to 2 in the afternoon, or 5 to 2, 5 past 2. I mean, who knows? But it was around 2 o'clock. And so if he really does have his ascendant at 2147 Gemini, that means that Moon-Saturn conjunction, which was taking place around the time of that meeting, was exactly square his ascendant. So we had Saturn square his ascendant, which really is something rather difficult. And this chart, it took place when the Sun was in the 9th house, when assuming the meeting took place at around 1 in the afternoon. So the Sun and the midheaven were approximately 10 degrees apart at the time of the meeting. And likewise, in Zelensky's own chart, the sun and the midheaven were around 10 degrees apart. So they kind of chime to each other, the chart of a meeting and a chart of Zelensky. And Saturn at 20 degrees 40 was making a semi-square to Zelensky's Venus. So Zelensky has his Venus at 20 degrees 53 Aquarius. So Saturn is very close to making a 45 degree aspect to his Venus. It's also pretty close to making a 45 degree aspect to his Sun. And so Venus is the way Zelensky relates. Venus in Aquarius, he likes to do things differently. He likes to turn up in his green, it wasn't a green t-shirt, but he didn't wear a suit. I mean, I don't wear a suit. I mean, so there's nothing wrong with not wearing a suit. But I think it's well known that Trump takes dress quite seriously. So if you go to the president's house, whether it's Mar-a-Lago or the White House, you should wear a suit. You should make sure you dress properly. Apparently, Zelensky was warned. He was told that it might be a good idea if he wore a suit and didn't just wear his normal gear when visiting the president. But he ignored that. That you might say that's Venus in Aquarius. But this time round, Trump took him to task. I think he asked him, "Do you own a suit?" And made reference to how he was dressed. That's the way Trump is. But in a way, by doing that, it was an attack on Zelensky, and in a way, the persona that Zelensky had been presenting throughout this war finally popped. Finally, he was taken to task. I mean, people had done it people had tried that line of attack in the past, but it hadn't really worked because everyone was into Zelensky. But now things have really changed. And also look at Pluto. Pluto 253 Aquarius. So he's got sort of Pluto moving quite close to his Sun and his Venus. I know it's not exact, but Pluto represents, the planet of transformation, and it's getting closer and closer to his Sun and his Venus. Okay, Pluto will go retrograde, and it may not be until next year, but we really see that. But that is, a reminder that things are changing. So you can see, in terms of that chart, that things were not good for Zelensky, and it was the worst possible time for Zelensky to visit Washington. I mean, astrologically, disaster. I mean, this clearly indicates that, to my mind, maybe Zelensky is not consulting astrologers. Any astrologer would have said you don't go and meet Trump at that particular time. And there is an astrological technique called it relates to the phase angle, and it's kind of daily returns. And so the way it works is you take the chart. So here's Zelensky's chart, and you look at the sun and the midheaven, and you see he's got his sun and his midheaven are around 20 degrees apart. So you do a return every day for the precise moment when the sun and the midheaven are exactly 20 degrees apart. So if you take that and his daily phase angle return, and I've set it for where he was born in Kryvyi Rog in Ukraine. If you take that moment, the exact moment on that day, this is a return for the day when the sun and the midheaven have the same angle as when he was born. You can see that at that time Mercury was exactly on the midheaven. So here is Zelensky making his visit. It's all about communication. It's all about Mercury. This is what he's doing. But it's on the midheaven, but Saturn is on the midheaven as well. And Mars is on the ascendant as well. So this is it's kind of like a daily return. I mean, it doesn't always work, but it does seem to work quite well in terms of describing, the kind of events, he's experiencing at the moment. And it could be said that his relationship with the United States is somewhat souring, and I was thinking, what is really the relationship between Zelensky and the US? So, here is the US's chart, and he's always been a supposed friend of the United States. The United States has looked after him, given his country loads of weapons, and kept him going in the war. And in the end, things have gone wrong. And so here we've got the American chart in the middle, and there is America's Mercury in Capricorn, and there's Zelensky's Mercury in Capricorn. So Mercury in Capricorn, that is how he communicates. That's his style of communication. And in the end, he hits this block. The American Sun in Cancer, 13 Cancer, is opposition Mercury. And interestingly, if you compare media coverage and popular views about Zelensky and the Ukraine war, people in America have always been much more skeptical than people in Europe, certainly more skeptical than people in the in the UK. In the UK, people are still just completely obsessed with Zelensky. And the Ukraine cause. Maybe it's starting to change now, but for a long time, the UK was totally monolithic in its support of Zelensky, but not in the US. I think there was a friction. There always has been a friction, but didn't exist in other countries, and that might reflect the fact that the sun is opposition Mercury. It's just something about the way he comes over, the way he communicates, that the Americans don't quite buy it. And then the United States' Jupiter at 5 degrees Cancer is conjunct Zelensky's true black moon Lilith. Very close conjunction. And I was trying to think, what would that mean? It just might be that says something about the Biden regime. the Biden regime for a long time was encouraging Zelensky and was maybe encouraging the darkness of Zelensky. And there is a darkness to Zelensky. You shouldn't forget that Zelensky has his Aries point aspecting the Mars-Saturn midpoint. Aries on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. The Aries point represents the world at large. Mars-Saturn is about death and destruction. And Zelensky, for example, through his decision to break off the 2022 Istanbul talks in April, encouraged by the West, he broke it off and has been very intransigent. And as a result of that, a lot of people have died. And that's Aries on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. And there were perhaps elements, in the Biden regime, who were encouraging his Black Moon Lilith and activating his darkness. But maybe that connection is now breaking down. And so those are a few thoughts about the relationship between Zelensky and the United States. Oh, also Mars. Look at the United States as Mars. Mars is at 20. The United States has its Mars at 21-23 Gemini, and so the United States' Mars is exactly on Zelensky's ascendant. Now, probably what's happening is that this Mars could have had several manifestations. One manifestation could be the guns, the weaponry, all of the modern technology that America has been dumping on, has been feeding to Ukraine over the last few years. That's Mars. That's his ascendant. That's one way of looking at it. But Mars, ultimately, in the end, is about friction. And so we've had this Sun-Saturn conjunction, this Moon-Saturn conjunction at the time of a meeting at around 20 degrees Gemini. Saturn is moving towards Zelensky's ascendant, and Saturn is also moving towards United States' Mars. And so Saturn has now caused, or is causing, that breakdown between Zelensky and the US. And then I just wanted to sort of go back to look at Trump's chart and what was going on. I started with Trump's chart, so I think I'll end with Trump's chart. And so here's Trump's chart again, and there is there's the link between him and Volodymyr Zelensky. And remember, Trump's Mars is right on Zelensky's Saturn. Zelensky has Saturn conjunct Regulus. So Saturn conjunct Regulus can be, Regulus is a royal star. One can go high, one can reach the top, and then one can just plunge. That's how it can work. And Trump's Mars on his Saturn is really attacking attacking Zelensky's boundaries. He's created this Zelensky has created this rigid persona for himself. Perhaps that's Saturn conjunct Regulus, a rigid persona of this presidential character, and Trump's Mars has just attacked it, popped it, and that might be, one way of looking at it. And going back to the chart of the chart for when Trump met Zelensky, and clearly Zelensky was quite overwhelmed by Trump, and Trump was quite sharp in his use of words. And at the time of that meeting, Black Moon Lilith was at 8 degrees 59 Libra, and Trump has his Mercury at 8 degrees 52 Cancer. And so that Black Moon Lilith was square Trump's Mercury. So that may say something about the way Trump communicated. He was harsh. Also, look at Uranus. Uranus is at 23 degrees Taurus. So Uranus is starting to make a semi-square to Trump's Mercury, and in a way, true Black Moon Lilith was just triggering it. Was triggering it all, and so those are a few thoughts about the meeting. I mean, I don't think that it's anything we don't know, but it does seem really, really difficult for Zelensky, and a lot of people are really upset about it. They think that Trump was unfair to Zelensky, but I don't think so. I think that Trump was, making it clear that he was there. It was all about America. He wasn't there to support one side or another in extremis. Sure, he could have some sympathy with Ukraine, but the whole principle of George Washington's farewell address to the American people is that the United States is not about being too partial. If the United States is too partial to one side or the other, it potentially will betray its own interests. So, those are a few thoughts about the meeting between Zelensky and Trump. And now I want to look at today from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So when I do this I Ching, just remember it is optional. You don't have to have your I Ching done. If you don't want your I Ching read for this week, you can just stop watching this video. And this I Ching is only for people watching it. So if you don't watch the I Ching section of this video, it just doesn't apply to you. So this reading, just remember, it has 4 sections. I do things from a general perspective, then money, then career, and finally relationships. So I asked the question, what is the week starting on Monday, March the 3rd, going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 31. So looking at the general picture, 31 is influence, and over the course of a week we should be looking at the kind of influence we have, and asking the question, do we actually have an impact? And we have to work out how best we can make a good impression. But we have 3 moving lines here, and it may not always be easy to get people to notice us. We certainly want people to notice us. That is absolutely the case, and we want people to listen to what we say, and we want people to pay attention to us, and ideally, do things our way. I mean, that's very nice, but we can have an idea about it, but are we actually able to put it through in practice? And we have 3 lines moving, and the bottom line moves. And what the bottom line says is it's the movement of the toe. So the I Ching is of the view that when the toe is moving, just one's toe, just imagine, just one toe is moving. And you could say that this whole hexagram is about movement and how we are moving and how we're able to influence the world around us through our own movement, through our own actions, but only the toe is moving. And that sort of indicates that we certainly have an idea about influence. We want to influence the world in principle, but in practice, maybe not, because it's only the toe that is moving. So at the beginning of a week, it's all theoretical, and I think it could be actually very difficult to have an impact. And then, as the week progresses, the 4th line moves, and the 4th line can be about having a clear sense of what we need to do, and we have to be continuous. Once we decide we want to have an influence, we have to keep going. We can't just give up. We can't just try it out for 5 minutes. We have to keep going. We have to provide a consistent role model. And then people will eventually start taking some notice of us. But we can't expect everything to work out as expected. And at a certain stage, maybe towards the end of a week, we're trying to make an impact. We're trying to get people to notice us, but we have to start talking. And if we start talking and trying to tell people what to do, trying to give our views and so on, it's not going to work. So if you find yourself talking at the end of a week, if you try to persuade people through the power of your words, then forget it. It's just empty words. And so, if you too much talking it's not going to help. Your ideas might be clever, but it doesn't matter. As soon as they're spoken, spoken words are unlikely to have much of an impact. Which is strange because Mercury is in Aries. Mercury will be moving through into Aries this week, so you might think that that's good. But perhaps Mercury in Aries, it says a lot. That's Mercury in Aries, but does anyone notice? It's just words. Now, this hexagram got 3 moving lines. It changes, and it moves to a second hexagram, and it moves to hexagram 37, which is the family. And this is maybe telling us where we should be actually putting our energies, what we should be trying to influence. And maybe it's just a question that influence begins at home. We can have some influence on our family. Okay, may not just be our family, but the people really close to us. But if we try to influence the wider world, it's not going to have much of an impact. So keep it simple. Concentrate on your own home, the people you know really well. Yes, in that situation you might have some influence, but if you try to go further afield, it just might not work. So I'm now going to turn to money. So with money, I don't know anything about your financial situation, obviously. I don't know what your financial concerns are, but if money is important to you, you may feel that you're trying to get people to take you seriously. Maybe you're trying to persuade someone to give you money or lend you money, or you might be trying to persuade someone to change their attitude to money, or you might be trying to get them to invest in something or to not invest in something. And of course it works both ways. It may be that someone is trying to influence you. So it does have a certain amount to do with other people and who has control and who's listening to who. And we have these three moving lines. So you might have an idea that you can persuade someone to do your bidding financially because the bottom line moves. But the bottom line represents an idea, something that is pretty theoretical. You theoretically think you could be persuasive, or you might be able to send a convincing letter or an email, or through the power of your words be able to persuade someone to relent in a financial sense. But it is theoretical, and it could actually be difficult to get it off the ground. And it seems that if you want to have an influence, you've got to sort of keep trying, and you've got to keep going, and you've got to say the same thing over again. No, well, not actually say the same thing over again, because if you talk a lot about your finances and what you'd like to happen financially, then in the end, no one's going to listen to you, because it does seem that this week words are not going to be very powerful. You can talk as much as you like, but is anyone going to listen? Now, it may be that the written word is going to be more effective than the spoken word. The spoken word is going to be particularly ineffective. Or ineffective. So there may be other ways of having an influence, but it is going to be hard work getting people to come round to your way of thinking. And it might then be better, whatever you like to happen, financially, if you just perhaps wait for another opportunity. Maybe you're just not strong enough right now. The strength just isn't there. You don't have sufficient resources, or you're not sufficiently persuasive. Now, we've got 3 lines moving, and so this hexagram 31 influence does move to a different hexagram, and it moves to hexagram 37, which is the family. And that may be where your focus should be, family finances. So when it comes to the family and the people very close to you, your ideas about money can have an impact. So people who know you really well will listen to you. And that may be where the whole process has to start. So if you're trying to influence a broader group of people going beyond your family, you might not make much of an impact. But so perhaps you should start by talking to the people who know you very well about money, about your ideas about money, how it should be spent, how it should not be spent, and see what kind of feedback you get. And it may also be that you're actually testing your own arguments and testing how sensible some of your ideas are. So if you feel you want to spend money or invest money, before actually taking the idea to the wider world, talk to a relative, tell them about it, see what their response is. It may be that when you play test it in a familiar situation, you realize that maybe you've got some of your facts wrong. Maybe your ideas aren't quite as good as you thought they were. And so, what is the point of having any influence if the thing you're trying to push is perhaps flawed? Though there are other ways of looking at it. It can be a time with the family when you can have a favourable influence on your family. So if your family are confused about money or on the verge of making a financial mistake, or some member of your family is about to make a financial mistake, it does seem that you can exercise some influence, and perhaps you can prevent someone from going over the financial precipice. And then there is career and business. And so the first hexagram we have is influence, and you are trying your hardest to make an impact, and you have ideas. Of course, this section may not be relevant to you. Maybe you're retired, you don't have a job, you're not interested in finding a job. Maybe not, but that's the whole point of these sections. I understand that not every section is going to be relevant, but if career and business are relevant, then with this hexagram influence, I think you are trying to have an influence. So, for example, if you're looking for a job, you're trying to persuade someone to give you a job. You feel that is important. Or if you have your own business, you're trying to use your connections to make sure that you are heard. But it's going to be hard work, because the first line, bottom line, is moving, and the bottom line is about a concept. It's about something, you have an idea, a theory that you think, well, it could be influential. If you just got the words out, people would listen. But there isn't much in the way of movement. As I said, I think when I was looking at the sort of a general reading, the bottom line is about the toe. It's about movement in the toe. That's what the I Ching says. And so movement in the toe is not very substantial. It doesn't represent an ability to actually make anything real happen. So it's just something going on in your head. And then as the week progresses, the fourth line moves, and with the fourth line moving, you might be in a situation where you do start to have an influence. People do start listening to you. But you have to be very, very persistent. You have to be there all the time. You have to deliver the same message, and you mustn't waver. You must really have a belief in yourself. But even then, there may be a point of frustration. You're trying to make an impact. You're trying to get, I don't know who it is. It could be your workmates or potential clients, or you're trying to persuade someone to give you a job. You feel you're getting there, but at a certain point, you may feel that you have to talk a bit louder. You may have to amplify your message. And when it reaches a stage where you are arguing your case, when you're using words to try to spread your influence, that's a sign that things aren't working. So the more you say, the more you talk, the less likely it is that anything is happening, because people are not going to listen to words. Your explanations might be great, but it's just not having an impact, and the words could turn out to be empty. And then we do have movement, and this hexagram 31 influence does move to hexagram 37, which is influence. And sorry, it's not influence, it's the family. And this is indicating that business success, career success, might start at home. Maybe in when we looked at influence, you trying to have an influence, maybe you were just looking in the wrong place. Maybe you were moving sort of too far afield. And with 37, the family, it's saying that your efforts should be close to home, should be in your home, perhaps in your home. And so it may be saying that you've been trying too hard to get things done, to have an impact in terms of the world outside, but just focus on your own home, the kind of business you can do in your own home. Or it's possible, if you're looking for a job or new business, it may be someone close at hand, maybe even a member of your family can actually be helpful. Maybe family members can provide the key contact. They know someone who knows someone. So that is something to think about. So in terms of career and business, don't be too ambitious. You're not going to have an influence on society at large. The movers and shakers are not going to pay any much attention to you, and the more you say, the more difficult it's going to become. But the people you know well, even your own family, they're the ones who are likely to be most useful. And finally, there is relationships. And relationships and influence are, very much connected. Influence is about, you trying to influence people. You're trying to form new relationships. I mean, I'm not saying you are trying to form new relationships, but you might be. And if you're in existing relationships, you're trying to make your influence felt. So, for example, if you're in a relationship and you're not happy about it, or you're not happy about some aspect of the relationship, it might be a relationship that's been going on for years and years, and there's some small thing you'd like to change, and you're trying to get someone to understand your point of view, and that's what you're trying to do. And it is all about influence, and maybe to an extent relative power. Who is influencing who? So in every relationship, it's not really this week about just two people accepting each other for what they are. It seems there's always a sense in which one person is trying to change the other person. In other words, have an influence on them. And it may not be particularly easy. It might not even be a worthwhile exercise. To begin with, you have an idea about how you could influence a partner, or maybe influence someone new who's coming into your life. You have an idea, and at first nothing much happens. You then might realize that the best way to influence another person is just to be yourself and to be constant. And that probably is the way to influence someone. Don't be in a hurry. Don't be in a rush. And above all, don't try to directly influence someone. If you try to tell someone what you feel and tell them that, your way is the best way, and if you look at these arguments, A, B, and C, you will realize that you've got it wrong, and my way is a better approach. And that kind of approach, where you're trying to verbally influence someone, that will be a complete disaster. So don't say too much. However important you think it is to try to get someone to change their mind, don't say too much, because that's not going to help the various relationships you're in. Just be yourself and try to have the kind of influence that is based on your character and your example. And if you're providing a good example and you've got a good character, then in the end you will have an influence. And just don't spoil it by trying to be argumentative or trying to talk too much, because words are not persuasive this week. I mean, that's a consistent message. The more you say, the less power you have. And then this hexagram, it does shift, and it shifts to hexagram 37, which is the family. And that could mean several things. If you are already in a relationship and you're trying to stabilize this relationship or enjoy this relationship, then the family is asking you to just fall back on the basic structure of this relationship. The family is a very traditional hexagram, and it asks you to look at the hierarchy. What is the natural power relationship between you and the other person? What is the appropriate power relationship? It's not about one person trying to get the better of another. It's just about accepting that there is a power differential. And once you accept that and just going with it and not trying too hard to force the pace, then it should be okay. And also with the family, the best way to get on with people, is to just make people feel comfortable and secure, and maybe to sort of provide a sort of a family setting. And again, and that is influencing by example, providing security, providing a secure social unit. That's what people want, and you don't have to talk about it. And it really is a case that the less said, the better. And that's it. That's my preview for the week. If you enjoyed the video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. And if you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. And I will talk to you again very soon.